Colonel Wilkerson, welcome to our program.
Good to be with you.
Thank you very much for granting my request. I realize pretty much everyone in the world wants to talk to you. I would like to remind our audience that we have the honor of speaking with Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, who is a decorated war veteran, a military analyst, a former chief of staff with Colin Powell, the U.S. Secretary of State, and a distinguished professor of government and public policy at the College of William and Mary. Colonel, welcome to our program.
Good to be with you. And let me tell your audience that latter is in the past because I retired in 2021 right after my wife died.
I'm very sorry to hear. But you did the right thing because apparently...
She was my driver.
Oh.
And much more, 55 years, much more.
I'm very sorry to hear that, sir. But the question for us is how can we teach international relations theory or international security studies when no one seems to care? But I wanted to start with this question. I read a little bit about your biography. As a young man, you volunteered during the war in Vietnam, and you flew some very dangerous sorties. That war was premised on a theory, the domino theory. And President Eisenhower believed it, JFK believed it, Lyndon Johnson believed it, and President Nixon believed it. And then it took a few years, and we hear from President Carter that was a little bit of an exaggeration. He said that was an exaggeration. And sadly, 59,000 American lives were a result of this theory and this false premise. And then you would be the best person in the world to draw these parallels because you were there in Washington during the war in Iraq. That war was premised on another theory, that Saddam Hussein had connections to Al-Qaeda, that Saddam Hussein had the intention of developing nuclear weapons. We heard these buzzwords, a mushroom cloud, mushroom cloud, mushroom cloud. The media kept repeating these buzzwords to build up momentum for this war. And then 8 years later, and 4,000 lives later, the U.S. withdrew from Iraq. And I don't need to tell you, probably have a lot more insight into this. And now we are about to embark upon another mission, and God forbid, I hope the administration, Trump administration, doesn't really deploy troops on the ground. So my question to you, sir, is how come that these theories are generated by the decision makers in Washington while we have in the United States the best IR theorists and the best IR scholars in the world, but we keep falling into this trap. We make decisions based on theories that are not true, and then American servicemen pay with their lives for it. And do you see any parallels between what is unfolding in front of our eyes in Iran and, for example, the war in Iraq?
Well, that's an entire load of things to unpack.
Yes.
Let me start and try by saying, and this is no excuse for what you've insinuated. I agree with you that very bad decision making, but my students on two campuses, George Washington University and William & Mary, as you said, beavered away in the trenches on these case studies for 16 years, 18 years, over 400 students who were really brilliant students in most cases. All juniors or seniors or graduate students.
Yes.
And I have an entirely different view of the Vietnam conflict and all the conflicts between then and even earlier, because we started with the Korean War, to the present because of that. They taught me as much as I taught them. So I could go into it in great detail on each of those wars, but let me just summarize, and it's a terrible way to do it, but let me just summarize by saying, as my students carefully pointed out, using mostly, if not entirely, primary documents to do their research, there was an explanation. It might not have been pleasing. It might not have been superb in terms of national security decision-making or international relations, but nonetheless, it was understandable. It was understandable even with Johnson, who really escalated in Vietnam when he thought he shouldn't, when he knew he shouldn't, when his key advisors whom he trusted told him not to. And he did because of politics. So one of the conclusions my students came to with regard to my country, and I think it's true with any country, but particularly so with my country, is that domestic politics often has the big hammer in national security decision making and in international relations in many regards. And you come forward to all the things that have recently occurred since 9/11, and you have still some rational thinking, some reasonable thinking, some thinking about genuine state interest, and even from time to time, allies' interests. With this with this administration, there is no such thing. This administration makes its decisions first and foremost based on how much money it is going to make for the family associated with the administration and for the principal, Donald Trump. Second, it makes them based on the scandals it is mired in, which it is proverbially in. And now the key one, but not the only one, is the Epstein scandal. And you've heard the tale of presidents using military force to get the attention off the domestic situation. Bingo, that's what's happening. Third, it has this nefarious ability to circle in its lair, Mar-a-Lago, circle up all the despicable people on the face of the earth, but particularly in the empire, who salivate over the prospect of war because it makes them so much money. Case in point, he has just had a meeting with 6 or 7 of the biggest merchants of death in the empire, from RTX to Lockheed Martin. And he's asked them, imagine how they receive this message. If they can ramp up production on all the munitions he is now expending at an alarming rate in Iran. And they all said, of course, Mr. President, throw me in that briar patch. So this man has an incredible ability to go down the rabbit hole with all the people who are already in the rabbit hole and amplify the dangers for the country from that rabbit hole. He is an incredible bandit, crook, mafioso. You pick your term, and it probably wouldn't be fully descriptive. So this is a very new phenomenon for us. And I think it has its domestic ramifications that are dire, as well as its foreign ramifications. I think we are within a 50-50 chance of seeing the midterm elections canceled, perhaps an invocation of the Insurrection Act, way back there, and a cancellation of what would be down the road for him, most assuredly impeachment, and whatever that means. Do we have a permanent tyrant? Does J.D. Vance take over? What's the process of the takeover? I think the country's in deep trouble, domestically and international relations wise. So that's a fast explanation of this is a very different group of people. I've never seen anything like it in my 81 years on this earth.
Well, thank you, Colonel. That's certainly a very powerful statement. I am a U.S. citizen, and I also voted in this election. I don't feel that President Trump justified our faith. I mean, he promised to be the president of peace. He said America first. This is not America first, and this is not the president of peace. And allow me to express my opinion, since I am also a U.S. citizen. So now, by the way, the invocation of the Bible and the Armageddon, apparently not him personally, not President Trump personally, but some of his, people in his entourage and some of the officers involved in the war were telling their soldiers that we are precipitating Armageddon. So we're doing, what we're doing is destiny. It's destined by the Bible. So are we talking about a religious war? I mean, this is a pretty unprecedented for the President of the United States to start a religious war.
It's the first, as far as I know, our history.
Right.
You're right. And it's been going on now for some time, but they have put a catalyst in there named Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense / War, who is an advocate of everything that you just said. He is a super religious individual. He has a pastor giving prayer meetings, his personal pastor, as a matter of fact, in the Pentagon. And while he states that they're not obligatory, anyone who knows the military knows that when your general or your colonel tells you to come to a meeting, it is obligatory, or you're going to be singled out and action taken against you. So we have a situation now where Franklin Graham, for example, whom I personally despise, can't say that about his father, Billy Graham. Billy Graham had essentially the evangelical fervor about him, but he wasn't a man to take that into the national security realm with a vengeance. Franklin Graham is very different. He gave a speech, a sermon in the central courtyard of the Pentagon, of all places, in which he quoted from Genesis like Ted Cruz did, only much more extensively, telling soldiers, sailors, airmen, all the members of the Defense Department they had a right to kill children. They had a right for God to kill children, to kill women, or whatever, citing the chapters that Bibi Netanyahu, for example, cites from time to time from the Old Testament. So it is a huge problem, I think, and it is one of the ways Trump is using Hegseth, who believes this stuff. I'm convinced he does. He's genuine in that respect, but he's using Hegseth to salt the military at all ranks, flag officers, admirals and generals, and down to the lowest private with these sorts of people. I've told people every time I get a chance in the government and out, the January the 6th attempt did not fail because our system held. It failed because the coup plotters were incompetent and because the military stood away. They're not going to be incompetent again. And they're building a military within the military to support them. So this is extremely dangerous. This is why I said we have a domestic component to this problem too, as Americans.
This is pretty unbelievable, Colonel. I had a friend in Washington who told me about a year and a half ago that this was coming. To be honest with you, I dismissed her as a lunatic. I said, "You are just joking. This is not possible." But she could see all of this coming. I mean, it's very hard to believe. Well, now that it's been over a week now that this war is underway, what scenarios do you think we should consider? I mean, initially we thought perhaps this administration wanted to intimidate the Iranian leadership into giving in to its demands. And interestingly enough, the bombing started while the negotiations were still in process, which is the second time this happened. So the Yugoslavian scenario is probably not going to happen. They're not going to bomb them into oblivion until they surrender. The Syrian scenario, I mean, they tried to rile up the Kurds. That did not happen. The Kurds were wise enough this time not to fall for it the third time, because they were used and discarded twice. I don't think any other ethnic minorities are acting up, and there is no civil war. So all those scenarios now are off the table. So continuing this war, continuing to bomb hospitals, killing children, it's a pretty outrageous case of 165 girls being killed. I don't even know that Western media is reporting this. Where is this going to take us? What are the possible scenarios? Is this going to be the Houthi scenario, where in the end Trump takes a step back and reaches some kind of an agreement, or both sides reach out for some mediator to come in and help them save face? How is the boots on the ground? Do you think this is realistic, sir? Do you think that the U.S. is going to walk into the same trap that it walked into in Afghanistan and Iraq?
Well, let me start at the beginning there. That's another, a lot of information. We are finally in some of the mainstream media admitting that we bombed the school and killed the children.
Yeah, it's terrible.
The excuses being put forward, though, by that media are the excuses put forward by the Pentagon. They just repeat whatever they're told at the Pentagon. And they're not talking about the hospital they bombed or some of the other targets that were egregiously bombed and shouldn't have been. That put aside for a moment, and to the gist and serious kernel of your question, I have no idea where this president is going. He has been all over the map, and I mean literally all over the map, as you pointed out, from saying he was going to use the Kurds. I think Erdogan weighed in heavily there. Saying that he is going to bomb them and bomb them and bomb them and bomb them, and that's what this meeting was for. at
Yes.
Mar-a-Lago with all the
Yes.
defense
Yes.
contractors
Yes.
because we're
Yes.
running out of a lot of things.
Yes.
But we're not running out of iron bombs. We have tons of them, and we put JDAMs on them, joint attack munition, I think it is. What it does, it's a harness that goes on an iron bomb, and within about 30 kilometers, maybe 25 kilometers for some of them, it is a PGM. It is a dumb bomb that is turned into a PGM by putting that harness on it because it gives the pilot the ability to guide the weapon in. By the way, we gave these to the Saudis so they could kill the Houthis, and the Houthis are still there. I'm sorry to say, but they're still there. So the latest, most insane thing he has said, you alluded to, and that is boots on the ground, what we call boots on the ground in the military.
Yes.
I can tell you right now, there are enormous fallacies with that reasoning, and they all lead, should it transpire, to disaster for the empire.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
First of all, we do not have enough people to put on the ground. Simply do not have enough people. If we fully mobilize the country, we could get 1 million or so, but a full mobilization would require conscription and a draft. I'll tell you where the young people in this country have told me in seminar after seminar across the country where they will go.
Mexico.
Yeah, Mexico and Canada. They like Canada now.
Okay.
Mark up there. So it's crazy. It's insane. We'll get, we could put 60,000 Marines somewhere around Kuwait. We'd have to get Iraq to let us through that little part of their country to get into Iran. If I were Iran, I'd sit there and wait for them and kill them as they came out. It's insane. Even if we did an amphibious landing with the Marines, we would probably get the amphibious bottom upon which they were embarked destroyed by a missile. So you're killing them all right there in the water. I have no idea what the Pentagon is telling Trump if General Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, is allowing the uniform view to get through to the president. Because even if Hegseth has managed to preach or pack, as it were, the Pentagon, still there are some colonels and lieutenant colonels there that are going to tell their bosses, this is insanity. You're going to get lots of people killed, lots of people captured. You're going to have prisoners of war all over the place. Have you looked at a map of Iran? It is as big as Western Europe. You see that Dashti Kavir desert up there? You see those Zagros Mountains? This isn't Iraq. This is a huge country with 93 million people. You are going to get a lot of people killed, not just the ones on the other end of your weapons, but your people are going to die. And you're not going to win a thing. And you're going to spend $1 trillion. So this is an absurdity he's talking about now, but I have no qualms about saying it might come to this. I would hope that a somnolent legislature would wake up and start impeachment proceedings because, as James Madison would have said, there is no better reason for impeachment than misuse of the war power.
Yes, and I tend to agree with you. I think it's becoming a likely scenario. And if you allow me, I also think that, God forbid that this kind of a decision is made, because the lessons of Iraq and lessons of Afghanistan are teaching us that sooner or later, once you occupy the country, sooner or later, you're going to have an insurgency on your hands. And then you're going to try to win the hearts and minds like the US tried in Afghanistan and Iraq. And then eventually you're going to have to withdraw. You're going to have to leave.
I don't even think we would get to that impasse. I think they destroy the landing on the beach, as it were.
Yes.
I don't think we would get ashore. It's a difficult. This country almost killed Alexander the Great.
Yes, I remember the Battle of Gaugamel. Yes, I know you like military history. Yes. Yeah. Yes, but he came
closer there to dying than any other place, especially when he was moving up the Persian Gulf. And Parmenion couldn't keep the fleet close enough to him to resupply him with water and food. He almost died.
I didn't know that part, but it's pretty fascinating. This country is at least 3,000 years old. So, yes. But coming to our region, if I may, Colonel, there were some attempts to, it appears, to drag in Azerbaijan. There was a drone that fell curiously enough, on Azeri territory in Nakhchivan, and then Iran said that it wasn't ours. We didn't do this. There was a report of a missile fired at Turkey, at Incirlik base in Turkey, and then an allegation was made later that this is Mossad trying to stir up trouble. To drag these countries in, because then you don't have to put your boots on the ground. It's going to be somebody else's boots, which is a lot easier. But that didn't work. So
you left out Cyprus.
yes.
I've got very good evidence that was Mossad.
Oh, really? The attack on
Yes.
Cyprus?
Yes.
All right, right. Now you have England and France steaming away towards Eastern Mediterranean. You have the NATO General Secretary saying that we will support this operation. We're an alliance of democracies. This is madness. So in our region, we have Azerbaijan, an ally of Turkey, an ally of Israel. We have Armenia that is in a very in a position of a flux, shall we say. It has pretty much destroyed its alliance with Russia and wasn't able to secure any guarantees from the West. But apparently, there is a large presence of Western intelligence agents in Armenia. I didn't even know that, and I am from Armenia. I didn't know that. So, what do you think? What would the Western alliance, I mean, the US and Israel, try to do in our region? What scenarios do you foresee for Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan? You mentioned these countries in your previous interviews, and what would be the smart thing for us to do? Because the Armenians, just like the Kurds, could tell story after story about being used by the great powers and then discarded and then annihilated because of their naivete. So what would you do in our position, in our shoes, so to speak?
Let me put on my professorial hat for a moment.
Yes, please.
Come up a little bit before I go down into the details.
Yes.
Are you familiar with Peter Frankopan's book, The New Silk Roads?
Yes. Yes.
Reading that book for about the fourth or fifth time, I came to realize, and it's so heavily marked up now, I can hardly read it anymore, but I came to realize that his basic theory is the thing that is happening on the face of the globe today. And by that, I simply mean power is leaving the West, and that includes Western Europe, includes the Western Hemisphere, with the possible exception of Brazil. And Peru and other countries whom the Chinese are now 60% of their economic life. They could be resurrected, if you will. But other than that, and that's all due to China, the power's going back to the East. It's leaving the West and it's going back to the East. And of course, the magnet is China. But Russia had as Russia always does, had a decision to make. And I'm not sure Putin's made it completely yet, but he's made it prima facie anyway, because of Ukraine and our dastardly deeds against him, to join China in this, which puts two of the major powers in the world in terms of geography, depth, strategic depth, people, and so forth, China people. And China's investing Russia's Western corridors. It's becoming a China-Russia game. Lebensraum is what they're looking for, of course, but Putin can't do much about it. So you've got these merging two giants, and you've got the problem of India. Well, not knowing where that very populous nation is going, but Modi, even though he hates Muslims and loves Netanyahu because he's killing Muslims, Modi has now got a real problem. He's got a $15 billion a day bill that's going to be due if his 60% of his refined and unrefined products come through the strait. They aren't flowing now. He's got a real problem. So he's now probably got to throw his weight in there too. This is all to say that the future ain't bright for the West. It isn't bright at all. I think people behind Trump, and I mean people like the CEO of BlackRock, I mean people like Gather at Davos, I mean really the Rothschilds, the JP Morgans of the modern world, are really alarmed at this. They don't know whether to jump ship, go that way. They don't know whether to stay. They don't know whether to back up and look and see who wins. So you got all these money people who ultimately are the financiers of the wars on the planet, thinking, what do we do now? Do we shift completely? Do we hedge our bets? Did you see that BlackRock, for the first time in its history, just limited withdrawals to 5% out of its major debt fund. This is the first time BlackRock has ever done this. That tells you what they're looking at in terms of these cataclysmic things that are happening in the world, many of which are arrayed before us right now, but people don't understand the connections. Maybe there are a few out there who are talking about this in the right terms, World War III, for example, regional war for sure, but looking at Ukraine, looking at the Russians in the northern sphere, for example, and what the Finns are trying to do to them, what the Danes are trying to do to them, what the Norwegians are trying to do to them, not the people, not the people. No, they're militaries, which are made for us. I was there when we started buying these governments. And the reason some of these countries abandoned age-old positions of neutrality was because we bought their politicians, we bought their newspapers, and we propagandized them to produce the politicians that they produce now. So we changed the whole face of the northern wing of NATO, if you will. Jens Stoltenberg, he was our creation. Mark Rutte is our creation. We produced them just as if we gave birth to them. And now we're going to pay for it. I think we're going to pay dearly because this is inexorable. This movement is inexorable. You and Georgia and so many little countries in the Caucasus and around that area, the whole Caspian, are caught in the middle of this.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
The waves are passing over you and the opposition and everything else. I don't know how you survive it. I really don't. I would say batten down the hatches, try to maintain your, we love all of you, especially towards the great powers, and you've got semi-great powers all around you. Really, you got Russia, you got Iran, and that piece that sticks up right next to you, and you got Turkey. Yes. So you have got a hard row to hoe, truly a hard row trying to, and it's nothing new for you, really. Your geography is such, but
yes,
and you've also got this tremendous effort by China and Russia to recreate what once was an incredible supply route, if you will, up along the Persian Gulf and into you and on up in Russia. And in fact, we used it in World War II. Stalingrad would never have held out if 840,000 wheeled vehicles, I know that sounds incredible, but they did flow along that path and up to the Soviet Union. Almost as much came along that supply route as came through Murmansk, the more notable one for World War II.
Right.
That's how the Soviets were able to beat the Wehrmacht, really. I mean, their courage and their blood, but also these massive supplies that flowed into them from both the South and the North. So I don't know what to tell you other than maintain a balanced posture towards all those potential enemies. Well, don't side with any of them. I know that's difficult because when you don't side with one, then the CIA comes in or Mossad comes in. And you're right about those false flags. Mossad is just doing that all over the place because Netanyahu is very, very frightened that Trump will leave him in the end. And I think he's got a nuclear weapon or two ready in case Trump does.
Yes. Colonel, my last question, but if I could comment, I think the Armenians at least have learned their lesson. They have been in the same position as the Kurds, and they have paid very dearly for relying on the promises of great powers and trying to enter a game where they have no cards. So I think your advice is very well taken, to be part of a game where you have nothing to offer, you have no resources, and then in the end you get used and discarded. We tried this. I don't think we should do this again. But my last question is, you mentioned that there is now the war in Ukraine. The entire Middle East is now on fire. What would it take for this to turn into a real great power confrontation? I don't want to say World War III because everybody's saying World War III these days. Well, what is a world war? It's a war where the majority of great powers are implicated and a war that takes place in more than one region. So we're getting pretty close. I mean, all that we need now is, God forbid, for China to enter the fray. I mean, there have been some threatening statements made vis-a-vis Japan. I've heard some pretty strong words coming out of from some of our Chinese colleagues with regard to Japan. So all we need now is for China to form a closer military alliance with Russia and, God forbid, enter this conflict. And then there you have it. There is a great power conflict deterred by nuclear weapons. I mean, that's the one thing that's preventing them.
The scariest thing for me is that latter one. I was around in 1973.
Yes.
When Golda Meir told a BBC reporter, and he put it in a London newspaper the next day, when he asked her the question, would you use a nuclear weapon? She said yes. Now, I think that was for public dissemination. She meant it to be public because at that time, the Egyptian Third Army was looking pretty formidable, and Israel was really in a fix in some sense. But I also know from some very, very close contacts that they did upload a couple of nuclear weapons in 73. So I wouldn't be surprised at all. And I feel confident in telling you right now, they probably have a couple uploaded right now. And I base that principally on what I think is going to be an existential problem for Israel if Iran keeps striking them the way they are. And the fact that Netanyahu, in his last close cabinet meeting in Hebrew, actually said words to this effect translated. And if it goes south, they will get an explosion, the likes of which they've never seen. And when he speaks in Hebrew, he is speaking exclusively for that group. When he speaks in English, he's speaking for us.
I understand. And what's going to happen to non-proliferation, Colonel? If this continues, what's going to happen with it's gone, isn't it? It's gone.
It's gone. Yeah, it's gone. If I were Iran and I made it through this and there was some kind of standoff or whatever, yeah, we're all sitting there looking at each other, but no one wants to continue it. If it were to get to that, I'd build a bomb as soon as I could. And I think Pakistan, and I dealt with the AQ-Khan network for 3 years. I saw how the Muslim world revered AQ-Khan, they call him the father of the Islamic bomb in Urdu, Farsi too. And I know that Pakistan has already made a contract with Saudi Arabia, and I know they've made a contract with Iran. If you need a nuclear weapon, just call. So Mohammed bin Salman essentially, I think, gave him $20 billion in payment for that promise and that deal. Intelligence communities know about this, and they're sitting there shivering in their boots, really, because Pakistan is really imponderable. Not only is their terrorism and their sponsorship of terrorism pretty acute, they are very imponderable when it comes to nuclear weapons. I think actually of all the states with nuclear weapons, they're the most dangerous. And I'd say even more dangerous than North Korea. So, and Israel. Although right now, Israel in extremis could be the most dangerous nuclear power on the earth. That's a problem. And there's so many other places. Look up there at that enclave the Russians have that has no Russian abutting territory, just on the Baltic. And look at the statement the American general made about we could do that in 72 hours. We could take that in 72 hours, Kaliningrad. I'm sorry, if you did, you'd start World War III for sure. And then look at what they're doing in the Baltic with Russian ships from time to time. They have actually had the audacity to fly out there and tell them to halt, try to get them to stop. And of course, Putin has put fighters up and said, you're not going to get them to stop. Any moment, this could go south very quickly, and it could go there in a very dangerous way, particularly with the guy we have in Washington. He would think it was, that's my godsend. I now can be emperor, Caesar, whatever.
Well, he certainly speaks like one. He certainly speaks like one. When the prime minister of Spain objected to this war, he told him he was going to punish him. He sounded like the Holy Roman Emperor. He really did. And I must say, as someone who has seen the end of the Cold War, the mid-'80s, the late '80s, Gorbachev, Reagan, the arms control agreements, the Helmut Kohl, Margaret Thatcher, that club of people, comparing that era to this era is impossible. it's like the
It
world
is.
has gone insane. It's like we have toddlers, we have teenagers instead of statesmen.
We do. We do. I remember Colin Powell stating very dramatically to me when I first joined him, 1989. I'd only been with him a short time, and he said, Larry, take a look at Europe. Take a look at NATO. Yes, sir. You know, I'm a lieutenant colonel. I'm fresh caught. Yes, sir. It's going to disappear. All of it. Europe and NATO, yeah, it's going to disappear because Mitterrand and Major and Thatcher and Kohl and all those people are gone. And 12-year-olds are going to be the rulers.
He was right. He was
prophetic
right.
Words.
Prophetic words indeed. Indeed.
Yes.
Well, Colonel, thank you so much. You've been so generous with your time. We're very, very honored to have you. Thank you very much. I'd like to remind our audience, we had the honor of talking to Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, a war veteran, a military analyst, chief of staff to the former Secretary of State, Colin Powell. Colonel, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.